Okay, hello everyone. I will just briefly frame the whole series, sessions on territories. And so together with Milica and with Jakob, we have been thinking about architecture in the civil service, and we have invited different speakers. Today we are starting the second half. So we had already three presentations, and today we will go deeper into public-civic partnerships. If you press the next slide. At some point, Jakob started to map out the different kind of axes and the different forces that are at stake in this kind of tension between architecture and civil society. And today, although this is very let's say experimental, today we go more into this bottom-up approach, but still very close to the state or to the public sector. And for this I will present our two speakers, and I have some notes here because I don't remember bios so well. So we have Rebecca. She studied architecture and urban design in Weimar and Hamburg, and she investigates the intersection of activism, planning, and performance. She's active in the Zusammenstelle at Rathausblock Kreuzberg. She's a co-founder of Urbane Praxis and co-editor of the podcast Haus der Statistik. And we also have Felix with us, Felix Marlow. He studied architecture and urban anthropology in Hamburg and Berlin, and he uses urban design as a tool for fostering solidarity. He's a member of the Haus der Statistik, which is a very, I don't know if we will speak about it, but it's a very interesting project and case in Berlin. He's also co-founder of the Tram Depot and currently working with AKS Gemeinwohl. If you can press to the next picture. So as a general frame today, what I think our two contributors bring with them, I hope without anticipating too much of what they are going to present, is that they are into this kind of what in Berlin they call urbane Praxis, which is a practice basically radically redefining urban planning as we know it, or which also redefines the role as the planners or as top-down master planners, and contrast this with diverse networks, cooperatives, and other city makers, as we like to call them in English. So these urban practitioners, they create spaces for civic engagement and act as catalysts in collective, cultural, political, and ecological dimensions. So they go way beyond just building or planning. And in this scenario, planning shifts also from producing those comprehensive, big master plans and develops more flexible transformations. And well, if I'm not completely wrong, that's what we will hear about today. And with that, you will also say something.
Yes, I will just introduce.
Sorry, I wanted to.
I will introduce Tabea. So to always bridge a bit our guests who come from outside Zurich, usually we have our respondents. Tonight we have Tabea Michaelis, which I'm very happy she came because she is something like you guys do, but in Zurich. So I guess this is the interesting to bridge it into Zurich. Tabea Michaelis studied landscape architecture in Rapperswil and urban design in Hamburg, together with Felix, as I hear. And she's also since 2015 she's partner in the office Denkstadt Saal, which is of course one of the most famous practices in that let's say format of practice. And she is now the co-lead also of the new collaborative special development studies course in Luzern. So with this, I'm very happy to have Tabea here, and this is you will go.
We go.
yes, sorry.
That's a shortcut.
Halfway to the Mac.
Hi everyone. It's nice to be here. Nice to see you here. We will talk about results of a research project that we conducted with Ignacio Farias. So this is us two, but Ignacio is always on our mind because we conducted it with him together. We will try to take on the topics and the difficulties that you have been discussing in the whole lecture series, and we will be looking at two model projects in Berlin from the perspective of these challenges that polycrisis now kind of pose to planners and architects, and try to discuss one particular mode of city production that has been developed in Berlin as this cooperative, common good-oriented practices. I already did not say anything that I wrote on this paper, so let me check. Okay, so I guess what we want to discuss with you today is on the next page, yes. The question is, how can cooperative and common good-oriented urban development succeed? This is a question that implies obviously lots of questions and lots of topics that we could discuss, but we want to focus on an aspect that we also focused on when we did the research, being misunderstandings as a mode, how very heterogeneous actors come together in these cooperative planning processes, and how misunderstandings actually play a key role in enabling, but also complicating things when these actor groups work together. And yes, to answer this, we will roughly give an insight into the Berlin model projects so that we all know what we're talking about and be on the same page, and try to discuss some key elements that define these cooperative projects so that we have a common base. And then we will look at the concept Public-Civic-Partnerships that we used in our research project, which basically describes there's a public side, so administration and politics, and then there's a civic side, which is civil society initiatives and activist groups that then try to work together to produce a common good-oriented city. And then we will talk about the productive misunderstandings, which is the concept that we then came up with when we wrote this book, I guess, and try to introduce this concept, and then ending at this maybe a positive, hopeful vision of how these projects can conduct to a democratization of expertise in urban development projects. Yes, this is what was written here, I think.
Thank you, Rebecca. So in this talk, we are going to focus on two rather unique experimental model projects of cooperative and common good-oriented urban development in the city of Berlin. The Haus der Statistik, which is right there in this rectangle near the TV tower at Alexanderplatz, a very iconic site, and the so-called Rathausblock Kreuzberg, which is located in this rectangle to the south of the classical Berlin city at the entry point to the district of Kreuzberg. So it is important to note that these two urban development projects are somehow right in the center of the city, and they are both working with existing building structures that had previously only scarcely been used. And this means that in our cases, it's not so much about the hinterlands of urbanization that are external to the urban center, but about something like internal hinterlands of city centers. Another interesting point is that these two urban development projects have been brought into discussion by civil society groups that demanded the cooperative and common good-oriented development of these sites instead of selling them out to private investors. So we had a strong protest movement in Berlin that somehow started these projects. To have a detailed look at Rathausblock Kreuzberg, one of those two projects, this is located at the so-called Dragoner Areal. This is a scarcely utilized site featuring 19th century barracks repurposed by small businesses, and that was slated for sale by the Federal Office for Real Estate Management, the BIMA of the German Federal Republic, in 2014. So after this announcement, a broad coalition, including the alliance Stadt von Unten, mobilized to resist this sale and advocate for a model project based on principles of social rent, participatory governance, and long-term asset lock. Their vision of urban development emphasized the common good through a structure that was both communal and self-governing. Through sustained activism, they garnered support from the Berlin Senat, the ministry, the government of Berlin, which then in 2015 took an unprecedented step to reverse the privatization and transfer the property to the state of Berlin for development as Rathausblock Kreuzberg. The Haus der Statistik, there was unfolding a parallel mobilization, particularly in the wake of the 2015 Summer of Migration context. So there was an initiative, Haus der Statistik, focusing on repurposing these former headquarters of the German Democratic Republic's Central Statistics Office, which had been vacant since 2009 and been slated for demolition under the 1990s Berlin-Mitte master plan. So they sought to repurpose these headquarters for a space for art, culture, and social initiatives. And here, once again, civic engagement successfully persuaded Berlin's government to preserve and repurpose the complex for long-term public use. So this was cool. In 2016, both projects were officially recognized in the coalition agreement of Berlin's then center-left government as model projects for cooperative urban development for the common good. Consequently, new collaborative frameworks were established at both sites, involving a tripartite structure. We had city and district administrations, state-owned urban development corporations, and civil society initiatives working together on project development of these two projects. So basically in both projects, the city of Berlin was taking part as the Senatsverwaltung für Stadtentwicklung and Wohnen, the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development, and the districts of Berlin, Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg at Rathausblock Kreuzberg and Mitte at Haus der Statistik were participating as the communal force that would be dealing with the actual developments. And then we had the two state-led corporations, the BIM, who is taking care of the Berlin properties, and the VBM, a state-owned company that is taking care of social housing and so on. And then the civil society was or is still participating in two different ways or with two different forms of organization. So in the case of Rathausblock Kreuzberg, two distinct groups, Forum Rathausblock and Vernetzungstreffen Rathausblock, serve as the civil society cooperation partners. And the Forum Rathausblock, is specifically designed to provide a voice to individual, unorganized neighbors and other directly affected parties. And the Vernetzungstreffen Rathausblock is a network of several activist groups. So these are two kinds of civil society who take part in this project. And at Haus der Statistik, there's a third way of organizing civil society demands. It is the Zusammenkunft cooperative, and this is something like a cooperative founded by experts and practitioners of cooperative urban development or urbane Praxis maybe, such as, for example, members of Raumlabor Berlin. So it's still another group of people who are part of the development at Haus der Statistik as the voice of the civil society. So we have these two cooperation formats that lead the development of these two projects for 7-8 years right now. This is where I hand over to you.
Yes. So obviously these projects were happening before we started a research project. They were built from lots and lots of people, and we are only two researchers that kind of take advantage of projects that were happening already. The only thing that needs to be said is that Felix and I also worked in these projects before. So we were both part of these projects. I was part of the Rathausblock, and Felix was part of the Haus der Statistik. So when we started the research project, obviously we also started with a certain positioning because we both worked for the civil society groups. And so researching on the projects, them like incomplete, also meant this difficulty of us being read by the administration, for example, as civil society actors. This being said, we started the research project with Ignacio and also had support by Pauli and Stasia as student assistants. And so we were this team that had 2 years of time, and we did different research methods. We want to focus today rather on this description and research on how this concept of common good has been discussed and negotiated between these actors, between these cooperating actors. So in the research, we never really decided on focusing on the urbanistic outcomes, as in like how does the architecture look or what sort of renting system has been established, but we rather looked at these practices of negotiation and discussion of what is a common good, just to put that before. And maybe because you already mentioned these hinterlands, we also always said that we look at the hinterlands of the institutions. So this is another hinterland description that we want to put forward today, is that all these institutions are represented by certain people that take part in these gremiums and that work together and that negotiate, but they all have a hinterland. And this is actually pretty powerful when they come together at one table. But we will establish what we mean by that in a bit. Yeah, and this is how I give to Felix. Oh no, yeah, we wrote a book about this. I mean, if you didn't notice before. And yeah, it's also free online. So if you think this is interesting, you can also just look it up.
So we understand these model projects, the Rathausblock and the Haus der Statistik, as public-civic partnerships, and thus present them as paradigmatic examples of cooperative urban development and the democratization of expertise. The term public-civic partnership describes a long-term, intensive collaboration between actors from public administration and civil society. Vedran Horvat summarizes public-civic partnerships as a hybrid institutional form that combines the democratic capacity of civil society with the institutional stability of public administration. So public-civic partnerships encompass multi-year experimental processes. This idea of public-civic partnership has emerged in the context of the debate on new municipalism, a political theory and practice that views the municipal level as the decisive lever for a comprehensive democratization of society. Based on the close relationship between an organized civil society and its representation in urban governments, efforts are made to mobilize state structures in support of civil society concerns. Public-civic partnerships are understood here as a tool to engage both within and across administrative structures. So often the term public commons partnerships is also used when emphasizing a specific mode of collective economic action. These two things can be sheltered under the term PCP, the abbreviation. So public-civic partnership is also being coined in order to distinguish itself from public-private partnerships, which are ubiquitous in Germany and elsewhere, I guess, and frequently serve as a common vehicle for the development of social infrastructure. And the theory and practice of these public-private partnerships have evolved from the discourse on new public management, which is closely linked to neoliberal notions of a lean state, and where the alleviation of state structures through profit-oriented companies is promoted, as these companies are seen as capable of efficiently providing a range of services, including the construction and maintenance of social infrastructure. These ideas are around for quite a while, you may have noticed, but in administration studies or in administrative sciences, however, the involvement of private partners in state tasks is viewed more and more critically. And in the discourse on something like post-new public management, the negative effects of public-private partnerships are highlighted. And while the alleviation of state structures remains central, a change in partners is proposed towards those who do not pursue profit and who can operate more cost-effectively and in a needs-oriented manner. So public-civic partnerships are understood here as a tool to save taxpayers' money and to mobilize civil society resources to support the administration. This is where the ideas and practices of civic activism, as in new municipalism, and administrative reform, as in post-new public management, may come together. And this, of course, poses a challenge, and which we use as an entry point that allows us to perceive the model projects precisely as organizational theoretical challenges. So fields in which different organizational logics collide while efforts are made to work together. And after all, in these model projects, people work together who would not ordinarily do so, and they do it day after day, year after year. So this is an opportunity to investigate. Let me introduce two observations concerning these public-civic partnerships. Firstly, it is often assumed that the main challenge of cooperative urban development is to find compromise between the diverging interests of civil society and city administration. This is true, of course, but for public-civic partnerships, the main challenge is to establish a project logic that is more than a compromise between conflicting goals. In order to establish this cooperative project logic, in these two model projects, cooperation agreements were signed, which set out common goals and projects. Furthermore, the two cooperation tripartite cooperation structures developed and launched specific procedure for developing a master plan. So we had the so-called integrated workshop procedure at Haus der Statistik and the urban planning workshop procedure at the Rathausblock Kreuzberg. And the model projects also developed new procedures for the formulation of tenders and the selection of service providers, allowing civil society partners to participate in these normally only, administration-only procedures. However, these promising approaches have not always been sufficient to ensure that the specific logics of the model projects are able to withstand the logics and interests of the individual cooperation partners, the hinterlands, so to speak. Many of the conflicts we were able to observe were explained by the actors by referring to the self-referential logics of each partner. So public administration staff would remain integrated in the hierarchies of their organizations, having to comply with their procedures and instructions. Service providers would remain contractually bound to one individual cooperation partner, even though they were supposed to play an intermediary role. And civil society actors would have to deal with the fact that their public legitimacy heavily depends on their ability to escalate conflicts and articulate protests, rather than in collaborating with public administration. We discovered that over time, each partner tends to fall back into its initial logic, and there is a lot to say about why that happens. We won't do it now. We can do it later in the discussion. Because in this context, we have also observed a paradox reversal in the kind of qualities that each of the partners needs to bring to the table in order to make model projects sustainable, and this is our second observation. Namely, collaborative urban development relies heavily on the personal commitment of city administrators and the administrative expertise of civil society actors. It is often assumed that civil society actors volunteer their time and effort for projects that are of personal importance to them because they are directly affected by them, and in stark contrast, members of the administration, who are often assumed to work on projects that do not affect them personally, seem to rather only follow abstract procedures and rules. In fact, in these model projects, at least how we perceive of them, both these assumptions are put into question. In the model projects, civil society actors are under great pressure to professionalize and to be able to use the language of the administration. At the same time, the city administration staff responsible for each of these projects is also under pressure, but in the opposite direction, so that they become personally involved and committed to the projects beyond their professional role. So we came to think of these individuals involved in the model project's day-to-day work as taking the role of public civic persons, articulating both expertise in cooperative urban development and a personal commitment to the cause. To sum up these observations, we got the feeling that in fact we can't see the creation of prototypical governance structures that allow for a more democratic discussion and production of the common good. What we see is the need for personal involvement of individual actors to make these model projects function as a public-civic partnerships, navigating a context lacking necessary structural change. So, how to scale this, how to transfer what's happening there?
I will not answer this question right now, but we want to look at several terms that have been used in the projects themselves, because we now talked about public-civic partnerships, and this is a term that is used in the Haus der Statistik to describe a certain organizational structure, but is not widely discussed or conceptualized by the people that actually do the projects. So in a second step, we also looked at terms that are central in the production and in the creation of these model projects. And we discovered that these terms, such as common good or cooperative or model projects, are being understood very differently and in very different interpretations. So we kind of, as I already said before, got the feeling that these misunderstandings are just as central as governing structures that are being produced or as individuals that are really engaged in these projects, as Felix has talked about it before. I don't know what comes next. Aha. So the misunderstandings, we came to this term by using boundary objects, the concept of Susan Lee Starr that talks about these boundary objects as being something that is pretty vague in the understanding and enables a very heterogeneous group to actually accept certain things as being said, like a material group. Now it would be good if I actually had the, So the boundary object describes how material artifacts are flexible enough to be understood differently by different actors. So what I said, it can be interpreted in different ways. And that way, these boundary objects actually serve as mediators between different groups. And another concept that kind of goes in a similar direction is that of smart equivocations, which was discovered or discussed by Ignacio Farias and Claudia Mendes before, where they went into an urban development project where they tried to look at real-life laboratories of smart city implementations, and they there discovered that these different partners also used terms that are very ambiguous, and they used them so as to establish ideas that maybe wouldn't have been accepted by the partner before, and so kind of use them as smart equivocations, trying to implement it there. And so we started off with these, and then we said, maybe there's something important about this strategic use of ambiguous terms. And we wanted to say that they can actually be productive misunderstandings, as in something that kind of allows for a decision when to discuss a certain conflict or a certain controversy. So these misunderstandings allow, as in like a retardation of discussion, and it's possible to say we do a model project and then both partners agree on this idea of having a model project, but you don't have to start the conversation about what does it actually mean to have a model project, but you can actually start the process, you can start the teamwork, and then at certain points enter these discussions on what does it actually mean for us. So this is something that we then looked at, and in the research project we had conversation with several people from the field, and we had them go into conversations between the two of them, so we didn't really conduct interviews or anything. And by listening to these conversations, we actually tried to make out what are the central words that are being used very oftenly, but understood very differently. And so in the book, we put the glossary of misunderstandings, which is conducted of 9 words that we found over and over again, and that are being discussed basically by the people that we talk to. So we use a lot of citations and quotes there, and we don't want to kind of have the final understanding of what does it mean, a Modellprojekt, or what does it mean to be affordable, but we rather want to show what are the different understandings of affordable or impossible or political or something. And for today, we want to talk about 2 of these misunderstandings, which is the model project and the Gemeinwohl, the common good, just to maybe give you a little bit of an insight into what we try to discuss there. So the model project plays a crucial role in the development of these 2 projects. Both of the projects used model project, the term, to actually lure the administrative side into these projects. Because model projects is also used as something in the administrative side, as something that is always really appreciated and really good to do. But when we looked into it a bit more and talked to people in the field about this term, we actually realized that there's very different interpretations, obviously, of this term. This is why we talk about it now. On the one hand, the public administration sees model projects as exceptions, as something that is very special and has extraordinary funding, is very visible, and by definition, thus cannot be repeated. And on the other hand, the civil society sees model projects as something that are prototypes, the first step into something that is a radically new understanding of urban development and actually aims to fundamentally change the planning procedures. And as one participant put it, she said, so we, talking as the civil society, understood the model meaning we are doing it here and then we're doing it everywhere. But the administration said we are doing it once and then we will never do it again. And this has also been shown in a different conversation that we could follow, where a person from the administrative side said, the initiatives expect prototypes for a citywide change, but we inside the structure know the level of support here could never be provided for every project. And she actually talked about it being kind of unjust that there's a project that has so much funding and that is so extraordinarily, time expensive. So this is a pretty easy catch different understanding and different poles. And obviously there's lots and lots of shades in between. And we were actually part of an evaluation workshop at the Rathausblock where they actively talked about this misunderstanding. And they actually used this moment to discuss what they would say, what are the model elements that are a prototype, what are the model elements that are just a standard, or what are things that have been developed in these projects that can never be repeated ever again. So maybe this is already a good example of a productive misunderstanding where talking about these different understandings of the term already opened up a conversation between these two partners and where they wanted to go.
And then we have a second example for today. It concerns the term common good, which is another central term for these two so-called model projects. And it is interesting that actors disagree not only about what the common good means, but they somehow fundamentally disagree about the methods for achieving the common good. And we only wanted to just put a spotlight on these different ways of how these actors that come together and work together have different ideas. What's the main point? So some of those people cooperating, they emphasize something like a broad participation in order to generate the common good. They argue that the common good can only emerge if as many people as possible are involved in negotiation processes. And then others prioritize legal procedures. For them, democratically legitimized administrative rules ensure fairness and guarantee the common good without the need for constant renegotiation. And a third approach, which is quite typical for the state-led companies, focuses on efficient resource management. Here, working cost effectively and saving taxpayers' money is seen as the best way to serve the common good. Thus, the method chosen, claims concerning specific needs, administrative procedures, or economic efficiency, shapes very different versions of what can be considered the common good. And depending on the perspective, different actors may claim or even deny legitimacy in defining and producing the common good. So we have a problem here. But let us conclude by saying that we can't say much about the intentions with which actors might introduce such misunderstandings. They might be intended to bridge existing uncertainties, or to covertly gain the support of the other party for one's own project. We don't know, but what we can say is that these misunderstandings exist, and that as the cooperation progresses, actors begin to develop ways of dealing with them, as Rebecca already mentioned. So in most cases, we found that actors were well aware of the different interpretations of these terms, but they rarely addressed these differences in order to avoid the potentially disruptive conflict that could arise from actively problematizing them and to avoid jeopardizing the cooperation. However, we also saw moments, and Rebecca already mentioned this, where misunderstandings were actively problematized, allowing conflicting interests and logics to be negotiated and leading to new insights and understandings of what was at stake.
And to finish up and to also enter into the discussion, we want to propose the perspective of saying that misunderstandings are actually not obstacles, but rather starting points of cooperation between very diverse actors. And we think that working through these misunderstandings can actually help actors build trust, and that is pretty essential in these new corporations and new modes of city making, to create a reciprocal understanding of each other as well, because if you talk about what did you mean with this term or what did you mean with this term, then there's lots of information about the hinterland and about the motives that you actually entered the conversation or the process with, and is actually opening up spaces for controversy, and controversy being a concept that actually holds the hopeful idea of having hybrid forums where different actors can come together and learn together and collectively, discover the new ways in which we can actually tackle these poly-crises that we are looking at right now. So maybe one last thought that is opening, or that's going a bit further, but we will just put it in here because we think it's important. We would say that cooperation then is an epistemic opening of what the common good actually is. So it kind of opens this question or discussion about what is common good. And it's actually enabling the democratization of expertise. Because if we understand democracy as rancière, as this moment of disrupting an order that has been produced and reproduced by the mighty, then this constructive moment of taking something into reconsideration, like a term, actually enables the emergence of voices that have before not been heard. And actors that before maybe weren't part of the processes as the activity, social initiatives, now take a part at the table. And now actually, if it works out, are being heard and actually can make a change in urban development. So in the context of urban development, we would say that the democratization of expertise means broadening the forms of knowledge that are recognized and legitimized for the construction and reconstruction of our cities. So we think that experimental modes and model projects, as we have been talking about today, are the open-ended processes that we need to have conversations on how to tackle these crises and actually enable new actors to enter the field of urban production and urban development and planning. And so we think that these misunderstandings can actually be a condition for creating these possibilities of new modes of production of the city. Yeah, I think this is it. Very.
And now we have Tabia.
What to discuss? So you make the open now, right?
Well, I can just say that it was an amazing presentation.
Yes,
and
really good.
Now we hand over to Tabea for a first reaction. And then, you guys can engage in a conversation, but then we also open up the floor to everyone, of course.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much for this description of our practice and research, and I think it's really similar to our experience in Switzerland, especially to Basel and Zurich and other cities where we worked with our office, around 20 people with inter- and transdisciplinary backgrounds. And I think it's interesting also in our practice that you describe this moment of Zaudern, or this moment of reflecting in the processes, and this is what we try in kind of an reflecting, acting in the process. So a permanent reflecting situation for our team to understand what are the next steps, because in our processes we have this kind of open-end situation, and also with our customers, with the administration or with developer, we try to figure out what is the next step in our process. So it's kind of a dialogue, or kind of inviting frames we create in our process architecture, and this is what makes our work sometimes invisible. So we have these moments of acting in invisible, or in situation we have to to explain what is our work at Denkstadt, because we are not building buildings. We transform the uses, der Gebrauch, for the next level. And we try to describe our planning process as a kind of lernende Planung. This is a term of our working process. And this means we have the role between the different levels of the ownership of the administration, the politics, but also between the everyday practices. And we have the role, like Bruno Latour claims, of the translator-speaker, and we try in our processes to be in every situation a kind of agency for the buildings, also for the non-human actors, and also for the human actors, like the current user or the experts of the everyday practice. So this is maybe our Zugang, or our access to our process planning, and I think the main point is at the moment that Zaudern needs time, and Zaudern needs the space for reflection, and also the space for discussion with the different players. And sometimes in our project we don't have the time for reflection, but you need the time for the next step in your process. So this is the ambivalence we always have, and you need this patience for the process, because if you call the administration, or if you have a question to the administration, you have to wait 2 weeks, because they have their own communication system in the administration system. And this is sometimes very difficult to act. By the challenges we have at the moment in different ways of climate, or of affordable housing, or migration, etc. And this was one question maybe on you, how you can deal with time. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it was not so many questions.
No, it's good. It's a conversation starter. This is what is supposed to happen.
I think what is interesting is that you at Denkstadt have like a self-reflective approach that is also conscious about what are we doing here. And I think that these two projects we were talking about, they were not having this cooperation partner that really would know our role is this and we are doing it like this. This is just to maybe for further discussion. And so it was only in our discussions with people in the field or in our staging of people discussing with each other that we came to know about, okay, who is dealing in what ways with maybe the problematic time regime. And there was also this tangent between us saying we all should take more time to reflect and discuss, and then many people in the field who feel that it is all taking too long and it's always too much to do. So I think that this is kind of an unresolved question or problem in these two processes. And right now I am working at an office space that is filling a void in the Rathausblock process, which is a very slow process, which means that we can fill this void for a very long time, which is also very nice. So you have those people who really gain from the projects not being faster. Yeah, so I stop here.
I think the time aspect is a really interesting one because it has so much tension in it. I remember when I was part of the Rathausblock process, we always, as the civil society side, wanted to have these reflecting moments. And the administrative side was always really tense and was in a hurry, basically. And even in the 2 years that I was there, and it's been a long process already, several things happened where this running on actually fell onto their feet. I don't know if you say that in English, but for example, the transition from scouting what is needed for the urban development plan, going from this process to the actual urban development plan was rushed. And so there was not enough information for the teams because some partners didn't decide on if they have a need for more office spaces or not, if they actually can take the plot they already have or not. And so this process rushed on, and at the end, the administration, the Rathaus said, we can actually not use the plot. And so, I don't know, 50 flats for housing were just gone. And so the whole concept was basically rotten. And so I think it's every actor kind of realizes that this time and rushing is a problem, but there's still so many rules how to go on that it's really hard to take this or take this rush out of the processes. I think time is also an interesting aspect because it always popped up when we had these two people talking about the projects, because it was always like in the beginning, it was like being in love, we did all the things, we really wanted to make it work, but over time, we just started to have these conflicts and and now we cannot do anything anymore and everyone is on their own. And so time is also, in this concern, kind of very powerful in these processes, because if you look at an organizational process and you look at the organizational structure, you think it's a timeless concept, but it is not. It really depends on if this is the first year of a cooperation or the 10th year or something. I mean, this is a very common concept in social relationships anyways, but it's interesting that we kind of tend to forget about it in the if we look at these corporations. And then I think a third thing that I just want to tip on is this idea of, maybe there's two more things. Well, okay, so the first thing is misunderstandings, I think, allow a certain game with time, because you can decide where the conversation lies in your cooperation. you can, as I said, you can have the conversation about what it means to be affordable in the first year, or you can have it in the 10th year or something, because it maybe doesn't pop up the first year. And the last thing, when we invited the people into the Zaudern, so we had this little caravan that we redesigned into an interview hub, basically, and we had an actress having conversations with 2 people from the field, and we asked these people to take 2 hours of their time to come there, and they thought it would be a regular interview, and this is a concept that they are well aware of and they know, and because these 2 projects are really important and there's lots of people asking for interviews, so they would come there and take these 2 hours, and suddenly they would be just basically the 2 of them, because the actress was the facilitator of the conversation but didn't really guide it or anything. And then they had 2 hours to have conversations about stuff that they wouldn't have time to in a different setting. And this was really interesting to get the feedback of how super important these conversations were for these people. And they were like, yeah, we should do it again, and da-da-da. But at the end, no one took the booth, or no one gave the recommendation. We still had to work really hard to get other people to come there. So we thought it would be a snowball system where 1 person and 2 persons, and then everyone wants to come. But at the end, everyone is so engaged in these projects, no one can take the time. And then, I don't know, I guess at some point it was clear that it's not an interview, but something else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So can I just ask, because with this actress, it touches a bit, I don't, what is the methodology, or what is how did you research that? Mm-hmm. Or it's it sounds like this Zauderbude with the actress is part of your research, or is it just a offering you did, or it's how did you come with your findings?
We have a chapter.
It's so good to have a book. We can just be it's in there,
On this, it looked like this. As coming from those 2 fields or projects, let's say, we had to come up with some kind of a device to detach ourselves from the relations we already had to be able to see clearer, to disentangle us a bit. So I think this was the main research device we were designing to build, or to build this stage for actual encounters to happen. Yes. And it was part of us being part of those projects, talking to people informally, gathering, inviting people to talk about findings we showed them, but I think this Zauderbude was the central method we applied, and we asked the people we had been inviting to the Zauderbude to tape the conversations, and so later, as we were not present during these conversations, we could then listen to them, and we were elaborating also our glossary of misunderstandings on those quotes.
So you didn't record the forum or something, or these are not part of your the actually the I don't know the actual process. You were taking bits of this process and bringing that to your own kind of I don't know capsule. That's to detach it, no? Mm-hmm. So you didn't analyze any of the actual thing that was happening. You removed it into a safe thing. That was kind of the.
maybe, I guess we brought, since both of us were working in these projects 2 years before, we brought these experiences of how gremium structures work, who is able to talk when, in which concern. We brought this as an information with us, and this was used when we listened to the conversations to obviously contextualize what they said, and to this was a huge help that we already knew, like, who is this person, what is this gremium. We conceptualized, or we put it into this context when we heard these conversations. But for us, as we already said, it was this really interesting question of how do they actually work together? How does it feel? Like, how do they see themselves in these projects? Except, or like beyond this whole very abstract or rigid idea of governmental structures and forum formats and things like that. So yeah, that was the central information that we worked with. And as Felix was saying, we always took every thought that we had in regular meetings into the field and had a broader conversation with workshops with lots of people from the field, and talked, like said, so now we are thinking that we could understand the model projects as something that use misunderstandings. And then everyone would be like, what? No, there's no misunderstanding, we know everything. And then, so this is, obviously it's always been a conversation also. And it was a good thing, because when we applied, we thought that we would have 50% working in the fields and 50% working as a researcher. And things changed, and we stopped working there. And I guess in the end, it was really helpful, because then we would be able to take the position as researchers to have these conversations and to pose these assumptions and have this conversation. And I think this is also something that I was wondering for you, because you were saying that this is this reflection that you try to bring into the processes, but it's always a position that you take in. And I guess the translator position is something that is really hard to obtain if you also want to have a motive or something that you start off the project with. So yeah, I guess, I don't know if you think about these things, or what your experiences with this positioning is also.
Yeah, this is why we a kind of agency for the buildings, or agency for the this situation in field, also for the actors, and I think this is we have a specific role in the project. We get a contract, and then we have to develop the process and to find our role or our position in this process. This is always in the beginning not clear how we can act with the administration and how can we act with the locals. Even in Switzerland, it's always different if you work in Basel and lives in Zurich, or if you work in Bern and lives in Basel. So the specific moments are, various, and you have to find out the culture on the site. And I think it's sometimes interesting that we have our motives. Of course, we have our motives for Gemeinwohl-orientierte development. So this is our main motor, and we have also the goal to achieve low rent, even with the SBB Werkstatt, for example. We have to work with Swiss Trail system, and they have another understanding of developing cities. But we have a very, very interesting person, Barbara Seleni, who support this development or this transformation. in focusing the urban craftsmen, and we try to find out how we can use the existing structure without bigger intervention in the material. So there was, so we try to find out the balance between the developer or the investor and also the locals and their specific needs on the site. And this is maybe our bridge between, we have the contract on one side, but we have also a social contract with the actors and with the people who lives on the site. And we have also a connection with the buildings, because we just try to reuse everything we can use.
I wanted to go back to what you just asked actually about the methods, and I don't want to give an answer for you or so, but I was trained by Ignacio as a social anthropologist, and a lot of what you say comes from this kind of in social sciences and humanities, that we cannot only do interviews anymore because these are just one-sided. You just get one part of the information. So anthropologists have turned into experimentalists, and they create this kind of modes of encountering, of experimenting with interlocutors. And from this kind of, you learn much more about, so it's a method, it's a method of co-production, of knowledge and understanding what is happening in the field. So it reveals a lot about what is happening, much more than just an interview or a questionnaire. So I think it's a very powerful way to extract a lot of what's going on.
And what is the method actually called?
It's they call it inventive methods.
Okay.
There's a book also about it, and so the idea is like you don't, or experimental collaborations. There's also a book by Thomas, where you might have known. He was also at the Humboldt before. So it's by collaborating with. I think Thomas, he worked a lot with disabled people, and collaborating about what are their daily encounters of infrastructure which hinders them to be free in the city. So and you don't just document what they do, but you learn how to devise maybe ways to actually be more flexible in the city. So I think they took designers where they had built ramps which they could unfold around the city. So like you as an anthropologist, you become a partner, an epistemological partner of those people, and I think that's what you just described in a very nice way. You became partner, epistemic partner.
And maybe one more method that was very influential for us is this scenography and design ethnography by Cantarella, and they talk about this producing encounters. And Ignacio actually has a really nice text about accelerating the slowing down, as in accelerating the moment of meeting and then slowing down to see what actually happens when you meet. And I think this is also the scenographic idea. What room, space, choreography does it need for this to happen, for this encounter to happen?
You raised the question of success at the beginning, and I got the impression after your presentation and also after your inputs from your office, I got the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at the end a public-civic partnership project will succeed if there are actually not only two partners, like public and civic, but three partners or three parties, let's say, including the moderator or the mediator even. So when you are talking now about these public-civic partnerships, do you consider them already as a three-partner constellation? Because actually you sounded like that. It sounded even out of your research position, you had already a subtly active impact, or could have had. So do you consider them as a three-partner constellation, or not yet? Or would you recommend to install the perception of a three-partner constellation? Because compared to the public-private partnership, they are always two sides, right? As you mentioned, the two sides, and gaining for the best advantage of each side, and at the end, the stronger or the better succeeds better, or whatever. So, what is your outlook or your recommendation on this constellation?
But the three partners are then a mediator.
The third one would be
And did you find that in the different partners in these two examples there was a mediator?
Not yet. Or subtly, I had the thinking as they might have gotten into this role a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But Felix mentioned that such an office, like Tabea mentioned, was not not involved in the processes. But maybe the Zauderbude got a little bit into this role at the end, right?
Well, it's Raumlabor, and I don't know if they consider themselves mediators.
So I have the impression that in these two projects there is a high degree of uncertainty and openness concerning the question of how to design these cooperations. And there are a lot of parties involved, and you could add more than just public and civic, and you could say, oh, there's also the designers, there's also the mediators, and also there's those political activists, and there's those who want to make money from it, even if they are more or less pretending to be on the civic side, and the public side also contains of the state-led companies who are maybe private partners. So there's a whole proliferation of possible partners to name, and I think this idea of a public commons partnership may be a way to say, we do want to produce the commons via working together with the state institutions. This might even be a better way to take the spirit of what you said is like a common good-oriented work. But then I wonder if these two projects are to be seen as those kind of openings where you really have an experimental situation where you don't even have that partner who knows what's going on. And so I would say if you would have this partner, which would be the third partner, you might do harm to this fundamental openness. And I don't know if you really want to have this fundamental openness, but I know that like Ignacio really enjoys, as of course an academic, this fundamental openness where those things that nobody expects are emerging out of the cooperation. So you do not only have the things on the table that people bring, but you also have the things on the table that emerge because it's such a chaotic catastrophe.
Being the overspill or something. Yeah.
And what's the status today of the projects? Are they still in this open moment, or have there been...
Can I add something more to the mediator thing? Because I think something that you said also interests me a lot, or I think this is something that interests me a lot in these different types of civil society involved. Mm-hmm. Because I think at the Haus der Statistik, the civil society actually sees themselves also as mediator, and thus is in a really complicated situation. Because they're civil society and mediator and trying to do process design and...
Who are they mediating then?
They are mediating the cooperation, and I mean it also is a lot to mediate between the state, the federal state office for the plots, and the housing company, and the district, and the Senate, so they already have lots of different positions. But then obviously they also want to bring in all the positions of the people that they are representing, basically. So this is a representative idea of the civil society group also a bit, because they kind of they understand themselves as representing the pioneer users, for example, the people that already use the space that is there, and try to translate what does that mean for the urban planning process. And I think then in the Rathausblock, there was this Zusammenstelle, or is the Zusammenstelle, that I was also part of, and there it was always really unclear if the Zusammenstelle could become like a project developer, basically, and a mediator, or if they are just representing one side really well, but they don't get the allowance to actually decide on how the process should develop or when should be done what. So I think this is just something that I thought was interesting, because it was always also a bit differently discussed, as in maybe it's also not good as the civil society to become this mediator position as well. So it would be good to have a third bureau that is able to take this mediator part, but it's been tried to fill with the groups themselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would mention it as a mediator, or I think it's kind of a process design. That's right, and I think it's important to create a space for exchange and also for interaction with the different players. So this is the main part of our work, to create inviting situations with different players and different performative actions to bring them together, and also to have this discussion and the different perspectives on the table. And this is the situation we need in our new planning culture, that we have this space for discussion and the time for this discussion, but then to bring it in a productive way into the planning back. And this is very important in our work, that you can make a lot of huge participatory events with post-its and cold coffee, terrible kekse, and everybody is scribbling something on the colored post-its, and in the end everybody says it's nice ideas, but we are sorry. And this is not the way we want to try, or we want to develop our project. So we try to find out what are the where are the makers, not what you want is our first question. Is more the question, what can you give in this project, or what are your needs for this project? And then we start the discussion, and then we start this process. And I think, and this is also what we do with our students in Lucerne, that we try to develop this process architecture with the specific formats and the specifics actors in the right moment. So this is very important. I think that we have the people from the beginning, but also at the end and over the end in the processes, and we don't take them, or in the German way you will say, wir holen sie ab. This is not our part. We try to interest the people, and then we empower the people in the end, so that we can go back from the from this transformation project. And we have the good point that the administration is in a process of learning. They recognize that they have not the instrument and ideas at the moment to bring these projects running. And on the other hand, we have the civic society who is interested to make their own projects. And this is at the moment our main business, I would say.
I would be curious how you deal with interests.
With
I mean,
interest,
let's say you are hired by SBB.
Yes.
So who has the agency there? Because I mean, this
yeah,
also maybe
absolutely.
connects at some point back to what is, like when there's endless time, we can Zaudern forever, no?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
is there an horizon? The perspectives are coupled with interests. I mean, I'm thinking of the largest participation project in Switzerland, in Zurich. What was it? It never happened.
Never happened. That's a good project.
Close to the Hauptblock. What was it called?
Okay.
Well, it was by SPB and.
Okay, Werkstatt. It's not Werkstatt.
Neugasse.
Neugasse, yeah. Yeah, Neugasse.
Because then you had civil society coming and saying, yeah, but it's still SPB, the main operator, and just putting that out there for continuing the discussion.
So I think connecting to your question, both projects were emerging out of a specific conjuncture or constellation politically, because we had a really strong social movement fighting for housing rights in Berlin. And at the same time, there was a political crisis because the government of Berlin had been selling their real estate for, I don't know, decades. And there was this moment where somehow it was possible to say, let's take these two plots of city center and put them completely into the real estate portfolio of the city, and then to have civil society actors be integrally part of the project development. So that there is a high you have as the civil society, you have a lot to say about the property, the territory. I don't know. There is no private company that could say, now we're not interested anymore. But there is this state who says, this is ours. But of course, if you elect leaders that make the civic administration do good things, then you have a certain kind of power over these plots. And that is what happened in 2015-16. And this is also, I would say, the main reason for those projects not being too successful, because this political situation has changed quite a lot. And even if there are a lot of persons who have been putting a lot of effort into making these projects work, there are no government members who really want these projects to be cool, and there is no strong social movement in the city who would go on the streets and say, this is not what we fought for 10 years ago.
Maybe to continue this thought, we also kind of realized that, I guess, the civil society side obviously doesn't own the plot or doesn't have the money to pay the process or the studies that would be needed to make a certain point. And the real value they have is if they're really well organized in demonstrating and in protests. And this street force or this is really important and was really strong when they started. And then this is also this moment of professionalization and making these projects becoming really complex, and it's really hard to actually still describe what's happening and why these things happened or this decision was made. And so the backup of these groups slowly deteriorated, and now it's really hard for them to say, if you don't do this, we have the publicity, and we can actually make a real outcry in the city society. So, and this is where groups like Stadt von Unten, one of the founding groups of the Rathausblock, exited the process because they said, we are so entangled in the cooperation and becoming a trustworthy cooperation partner that we don't have any capacity anymore to actually do the whole work with organizing people to stand up if this is not working out. So they said, we can't continue doing this because we now have no, power anymore over within our situation. So, and I think this is something that is definitely needs to be critically looked at in these processes, because that happens regularly. And I think the Haus der Statistik has a different strategy with establishing these pioneer uses. So they have people that do things, and this speaks for what it could be, the future district. And so it's in the making, and with this exists somehow, but it's not as political. It's something different. You can't lobby for affordable housing in a pioneer use. So some topics can't be fought for without the political organization of civil society activists. Yeah.
I had a question about that, because this idea of professionalization and what things that I hear, or you hear that, these people, the civil society is not being paid, right? Or are they partly?
Partly, yeah. So in the Haus der Statistik, the Zusammenkunft EG, the civil society group, they always get paid a bit for certain aspects of the project development. So, for example, they got paid for establishing this on-site Werkstatt, where people could come in and be informed about the urban development process, for example. And they do cooperative agreements regularly, so it was... we could have brought in some more pictures, but you'll have to buy the book. So they have cooperative agreements, and attached to every cooperative agreement at Haus der Statistik, there's one financial list, and this is always where it's defined what the civil society group gets money for, what element basically. But there's still obviously lots of work that is being done voluntarily or really badly paid. So, and in the Rathausblock, it's a bit different. There it's not organized via these cooperative agreements, but there's one entity called Zusammenstelle, which is funded by the district for certain tasks. So they're paid to establish an archive, to do some conversation, to have a regular open meeting point for people that want to inform themselves about the process, and stuff like that. And this whole organizing the civil society groups is also a bit implicit in the tasks that they get paid for. So it's always lots of people doing unpaid work, but there's some money flowing. Yeah.
And so what is invisible in these official charts is the work that is being done by service providers. And so there are a lot of contracts with private companies who are mediating for the city normally. It's just a thing that happens a lot, that there are a lot of mediators in Berlin. For example, the names, it's called Stern or List or Zebralog or... they are normally they are somehow part of this participation industry. And somehow they have to be brought in when the city is doing things.
So the city had die beauftragt.
Yes, and in Rathausblock Kreuzberg, there is a lot of them because also there is a lot of money that can be spent for this because it is was a so-called Sanierungsgebiet and now is something else, but there is a Förderkulisse. So state money can go into this process, and if you can argue that it is about participation, then you're on the safe side. It is far more difficult to finance this Zusammenstelle, which is a service provider only for the civil society people. So this is done by the district, and it's quite partisan way of spending taxpayers' money. Not partisan, radical.
There's a top that is a pot for participation in these processes, and the Zusammenstelle is also paid via this pot. So yeah, it seems partisan because you always have to argue again for it, but it's basically there's a pot that could be used for it. Yeah.
And so this Haus der Statistik does not have the same funding infrastructure, and people always have to negotiate which kind of funding can be used for which part of the project development.
Yeah, and this is also why in this glossary of misunderstandings we also have we have terms and we have roles, and one of the roles that we thought was really ambiguous was Dienstleister, so service providers, and we try to distinguish between Dienstleister, service providers that work for the whole corporation, and some of them working for singular actors, and then how they take different roles, and how, the hiring process obviously also already puts them on one or another side.
Can I ask a question about? I don't know if it's not a provocation. It's more like a thought thing about how niche is it, the whole what you just presented, because I don't know so much about the context of the Modellprojekt. I know that there's an emerging industry of facilitating or process design or participation, as you just mentioned. And I agree very much with the idea of Zaudern and slowing down, but somehow there's still the market logics everywhere, and so how possible is it to translate this into, a sustainable bottom-up practice without getting lost in these endless loops of we just create moments of participation, and maybe to give us an understanding, is there any foreseeable point in which those projects will have housing or be I don't know, or be something constructed, just to understand.
So one important thing I think is that these two projects try to go beyond participation, and in their initial founding myth, it's about cooperation and not participation. But as there is this external world of market economy, there's also this external world of participation ideology, I don't know. So these two projects also use funding for participation in order to achieve cooperation, something like that. And then have to deal with a lot of participatory actors who do not really get what the civil society actors want to achieve if they are already being asked. And then I think there's also a tiny hope for a change of political constellations. So next year there's the new Senate of Berlin being elected, maybe then we will have a government that says these projects should be common good oriented and not just pretend to be, and they should produce social housing that people can actually live in. At the moment, it is a bit like the government of Berlin is not really open about their change of politics, but they changed their politics and actually they do not want these things to happen, but they are too big and too obvious to be just cut. So there's a lot of negotiations going on in changing what was initially put down in the cooperative agreements, but it's based on the Einzelfall Logik. So now we can't do this in this way. We have to see how to do this in this way. And so right now, I think the city of Berlin has already produced office space for themselves. This worked. In Haus der Statistik, the city of Berlin was able to now house their own administration.
I was driving by and I thought I saw images of a facade. I'm not sure if it's meant in an earnest way or if it's just an image that's hung up there.
No, I would say this really happened. The city of Berlin put money into not tearing down the whole building, but only the facade, and then doing like really standard office spaces. And we tried a lot. I think a lot of people at Zusammenkunft Berlin spent a lot of time in their lives to somehow find the entry point into this process, because we said, you signed that we wanted to do it differently. But then there was always the possibility to say that this BIM company is the company that is providing office space for Berlin, and actually nobody can discuss with them how they do it. So this is what we learned.
Sorry, Eva, did you want to? Another question that I heard, and maybe this is a change of this government, that that there was a process in Berlin that projects for the common good, certain projects, they have priority. If you have to come up with a concept, a development concept that is for the common good. For example, I think, isn't the Art Plus building one of those kinds of projects? Or where Art Plus is? The offices, yeah. And there is a kind of certain projects you can only, let's say, develop them if with a certain formula for the common good. Do you know what I'm talking about? Does it still exist? I mean, I also think when you're asking, Julia, what will anything ever happen? Can it possibly be a way forward? I was quite impressed to hear that this was a kind of an accepted process in kind of development, or at least one of the processes, as a new initiative.
I can start, but I think you can fill the gaps. So I think maybe what you're talking about is the Konzeptvergabe. And this is a process of giving out public land to common good oriented developers that is based on a process that started already like 10 years ago, when, or even longer, there was the Runde Tisch Liegenschaftspolitik. So a round table of activists that actually called in for a bigger constellation of activists and public and political actors in Berlin trying to stop the selling out of public land. And they had this idea and thus created this Runder Tisch. And from this, the concept of the Konzeptvergabe as a way to give out maybe these plots of land, but to common good oriented practices, they developed these processes, and it took forever to develop this. And now, or I think it's already 5 years old, the first Konzeptvergabe paper on this. Now they try to establish this process with BIM, so the state-owned, and it's been going on for a while, but Felix can talk about how difficult it is if you win a concept that is within this Konzeptvergabe process.
I mean, if everyone's interested, I just wondered what happened to that, and it sounds like it's quite closely aligned to these kinds of projects, and that maybe these projects were influential in establishing this Konzeptvergabe.
I think there was this protest cycle that started in the late 2000s, I don't know, and the movement came up, or the results were the change of the real estate policy of the city of Berlin, not to sell, but to ground lease its property, and in order to have good concepts for the common good. And we had a referendum on how to work with the state-owned companies and their housing stock, that it has to be socially and not for profit. And then we had people who were more or less working on the programs, and people who started working on specific projects. And I think around 2015-16 it was a high density of exchange between all those parts of the movement. And in 2016 it was also possible to then elect people who would form a government that was pro all these things. So I think that was the main, moment in time where all of these things crystallized, and they have not been completely wiped out yet, but like year after year, month after month, step after step, it's getting harder and harder to really go forward with this. But it's some kind of quiet quitting by the city government. They try to avoid the scandal.
What would happen if these titles in the middle of the diagrams, which now seem to be kind of titles or names for the whole thing, if those wouldn't be just titles, but an own, let's say, entity, even with an own interest, as was mentioned before. Yeah. So, for example, Coop 5 is a group, a small group of people with their own interests of earning a lot of money if the whole project succeeds. So they are responsible, and also, for both results, success or failure. And the condition to succeed is that all 5 participants have to provide their approval for the final outcome. So a kind of checks and balances thing, maybe, and with a huge beneficial financial advantage for the center group. Could this change a little bit this the whole constellation, or was it?
I don't know about the money thing, but about the legal thing, one of our interlocutors said, well, this is for him the main point, that you should have put this into legal forms right away, so that then all those service providers could also just do their service to the whole corporation and not to one of the partners. And I think in both projects, the civil society people had in mind that over the long run, this should develop into something like that. And in the case of Haus der Statistik, the Zusammenkunft cooperative has been arguing for a long time for establishing such a so-called public-civic partnership, which, like at Zusammenkunft cooperative, it is thought of as a specific legal organization or framework. And I would say we are still trying to make this happen, but it's at the moment it's not really smoothly working.
I don't know. So the Co-op 5 is, I thought it was just the name for those 5 parts. It is. Okay, so
Unfortunately.
but it's not an extra. It's made up of representatives from those 5. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. And the Zukunftsrat is actually all of those people.
Yes, but then all those people come here as representatives of their institution, their hinterlands, and there's like, it is clear that the Auftrag,
Submission?
yeah, like of their hinterlands is stronger than the cooperative mission itself.
But also the balance of these things. I mean, here you have one representative group from civil society, right? Zusammenkunft. And then you have the VBM, BIM. Oh, VBM is I mean, they should not necessarily be. Are they on the side of the Senat or the Bezirksamt? I mean, I'm not sure if how or their relationship there, but when you see that it's like 4-1, basically, and those people are owning money, and those people are. Yeah, so I mean, should there be some kind of change in these kind of constellations? Is that even possible? Or I'm sorry, I took over. I didn't mean to.
No, but it's exactly the point.
Yeah,
it's because this question actually would not be important anymore if Coop 5 would be the sixth entity.
Right. Yeah.
With the whole condition that the sixth entity, with its own interests, this
make things succeed.
To make things succeed,
Yeah.
and maybe then they get a benefit or an extra paid and so on. But the only condition is that all of the 5 main participants have to provide their approval for this final outcome. So, and if it happens, what Rebecca said, that they quit because they can't, they weren't in line anymore with the direction of the development, then the whole thing would fail, and that's why the Coop 5 entity would have an interest of keeping them on board. And
negotiating
and providing them with their own interest and success.
Still, to balance between this 4-1 situation inside of the cooperation, I think it would be helpful to have a political environment with a strong social movement and a government that is in favor of using the state-owned companies for civil society's demands or something like that. I think without this external pressure, it will always be hard for civil society actors to collaborate with.
Can I ask one last question also, because time is running out and maybe it helps concluding this, is like, what motivates you? You know, in the sense, like, of course you have been researchers in this specific constellation, you have worked there before, but I consider you part of this new wave of city makers from below or in all those associations and networks. What motivates you to keep going in light of the very complex constellations that we see here? I mean, you don't need to answer on the personal terms, but what is interesting in contrast to more traditional architecture practice or city planning, you know, to stay within the frame of the series.
You can go first.
I think one point is that we observe a situation where the real estate industry is far too powerful for citizens to mobilize, organize, engage, and do something against it. So we need partners, and the state in our democratic system is maybe the primary partner. And so I think these projects are ways of trying at least what can be done and learning how these things could be done otherwise. This is enough motivation to keep going. But actually in Berlin during the last 10 years, it was, of course, a frustrating experience on the long run. Has been.
Yeah. I think this whole realization of the world being very uncertain right now, and then asking the question, how should we ever get out of this, or like how can we ever work with this situation of being in complete uncertainty? And for me, I always consider these different constellation of actors and the whole friction and irritation that happens there as a really good field of discussing what we want to do and where we actually want to go. And I think this is why I always try to go into situations like this, where you can't just go on with a scheme F, but you actually have to ask questions and actually make the status quo as a topic to discuss rather than just working on it. And I think in these very heterogeneous situations, this is where it actually can happen. So, yeah.
I would like to ask something maybe towards the end. Thank you for your presentation. I have to say that I do speak German, but I didn't know the word Zaudern until now. And I was actually trying to find it in English, and I didn't find a satisfactory translation to it. And you've been talking also a lot about this Zauderbude and how this has been like a very concrete step of you to kind of like invite some actors to a very concrete place, basically. So how would you translate Zauderbude in English and to like yeah, because I mean it's hesitant, it's chaotic. Is it muddling? Is it like what? How can you like find the essence of Zaudern in another language than German?
I think we decided to just make it an English word. Yeah, so the concept of Zaudern comes from Josef Vogel, who wrote a book about his idea of Zaudern, and for me it was also not so well known. But when we started, actually, Olaf Scholz got a chancellor, and he was called the Zauderkanzler. So that's when the word came in to common knowledge. But no, so yeah, I think it's it's been a really difficult discussion, and I don't think we actually came to a conclusion yet. This is why we didn't talk about it today. No, obviously not, but yeah.
But as a pragmatic answer, I might say it's a bit like hesitation, but as the first step in a sequence of action, at least as Josef Vogel wraps it up.
I would also say it's like moving forward very timidly.
It's not pausing because you actually do something, but it's this. He also calls it the in-between time, the Zwischenzeit that you create.
And there is a slight relation to things that are not easily to be done.
To tackle.
It's a combination with procrastination.
I feel like procrastination is something that you don't want to do, but you have to do it. And here it's like more of a search, and like trying out different things and trying to find your way in a very complex situation. So, but
Our lecturer, she proposed the word "sitting on a fence" for Zaudern. Yeah, I guess.
And it's too easy, actually, right? Just sitting.
I mean, yeah, it's just, I thought it was an interesting picture. Maybe it's also,
Okay. Yes, so thank you. We will now have the opportunity to continue this somehow in, I think, in the remaining air and outside. And Amelie is also providing, setting up some beer and some snacks, and then we can sit there, maybe. Yeah. Thank you.